Well, and I have to say right at the outset that I think it's absolutely incredible to hear the Leader of the Opposition lecturing anybody else about observing the rule of law. And, Mr Speaker, they've already started moaning, but they ought to listen. They ought to listen. They ought to listen. They're going to have to get used to it, because the points I'm going to raise, in this debate are the questions they're going to have to answer in an election campaign, and they're going to have to explain to their voters and their constituents and the people of this country why they think someone with an appalling record like the Leader of the Opposition is fit, not just, well, the honourable lady behind me asked why I don't go and sit somewhere else. I'm sitting here, I'm standing here, well, I'll explain why. I'll explain why. I'm standing here because I was elected, because I think...
Order and main.
We are having incredible difficulty hearing the honourable gentleman, who is making a very powerful speech because he's being barracked.
Oh dear. Well, I don't wish to be unkind to the honourable lady, but she's not entirely averse to making loud noises from a sedentary position. So, although I appreciate her importance, contribution on this, I think I'll make the judgment myself if she doesn't mind. I'm deeply obliged to her. Ian Austin.
Speaker, the more they interrupt, the longer it'll take. But I'm going to make the points. And the reason I haven't moved is because I didn't leave the Labour Party to join another party. I left the Labour Party to shine a spotlight on the disgrace it's become under his leadership, and because I regard myself as proper, decent, traditional Labour, not like the extremists who've taken over this party and are dragging it into the mud. And that's the point I'm going to make in this debate. And I want to say this. These are people, the Leader of the Opposition, the Shadow Chancellor, these are people who've spent their entire time in politics, working with, defending all sorts of extremists, and in some cases terrorists and anti-Semites. Remember what these people said about the IRA. It might be ancient history to the Labour Party's new young recruits, but many people will never forget how they supported terrorists responsible for horrific carnage in a brutal civil war that saw people blown up in pubs, hotels and shopping centres. A few weeks after the IRA blew up a hotel in Brighton, murdered 5 people at the Tory party conference, the Leader of the Opposition invited 2 suspected IRA terrorists to Parliament. When the man responsible for planting that bomb was put on trial, he protested outside the court. The Shadow Chancellor said that, quote, those people involved in the arms struggle, people he said had used, quote, bombs and bullets, should be honoured. And they have the brass neck to lecture anybody about the rule of law. What a disgrace. Let me tell you this.
Point of order, Graham Davis.
Stan, this debate is about obeying the rule of law, whether the Prime Minister obeys the rule of law, not whether members talk to people who allegedly have broken the law. It's about whether we deliver the rule of law.
Deeply grateful to the honourable gentleman. His antennae are keenly attuned to the debate. There is a fine dividing line. The honourable gentleman is dilating on the broad theme of disregard bordering upon contempt for the law. If I think he has elided into a wholly different subject, then I will always profit by the honourable gentleman's counsels. But for now, he's all right. Just. But I do warn the honourable gentleman that I hope his speech tonight, given that many other people wish to contribute, is not going to be as long as the speeches he used to deliver at the Students' Union at the University of Essex 36 years ago, when we jousted together. It needs to be shorter. Mr. Ian Austin.
Well, Mr. Speaker, my speeches then were a lot shorter than yours.
Well, that may be, but what I would say to the honourable gentleman is that by common consent, mine were considerably better. Mr. Ian Austin.
Well, I'm not going to argue that point, Mr. Speaker. But look, this is a debate about whether politicians can be trusted to obey the rule of law. And there's not a single Labour figure in the past, not a single one, who would have backed violent street protest, as the Shadow Chancellor did, when he called for, quote, insurrection to bring down the government, or praised rioters who he said had kicked the SHIT out of the Conservative Party's offices, or talked, well, she might not want to hear it, but I tell you this. Well, I'm not going over. Well, I've explained why I'm not going over there. But I'll tell you this. I'm here because voters in Dudley North sent me here to represent them. And my views and the things I stand up for, decency in politics, the rule of law, none of these things have changed, and everybody in Dudley knew exactly what I thought of these people at the last election. And I'll tell you this, and I'll tell the honourable lady this, I'm going to make absolutely certain that she's going to have to answer to her voters for these points at the next election. All right? Well, we'll see. Now,
you have to answer to yours.
Yeah, don't worry about that. And no other senior figure in the Labour Party's history, would have joked about lynching a female member of Parliament. They don't believe in the rule of law abroad either, Mr. Speaker. They always back the wrong side, whether it's the IRA or Hamas and Hezbollah, who they describe as friends. No previous Labour leader would have supported brutal totalitarian dictatorships like the ones in Cuba or Venezuela that have absolutely no regard whatsoever for the rule of law, and no previous Labour leadership would have allowed a party with a proud history of fighting racial prejudice to have been poisoned by racism, which is what's happened under these people. Racism against Jewish people, to the extent that members have been arrested on suspicion of racial hatred, that the party itself has become the first in history to be investigated under equalities laws by the Equalities and Human Rights Commission. These people and the people around them are a million miles away from the traditional, mainstream, decent politics of the Labour Party. They have poisoned what was once a great party with extremism. They cannot be trusted with the institutions that underpin our democracy. They are completely unfit to lead the Labour Party, let alone our country.